Before we read, I wanted to kind of get a running start on something. We're going to start in technically from 5 through 14. I hope we get through all that. I don't know. We may just get through 5 and 6. I don't know. But I wanted to start back up again on verse 1. And just as a reminder, it says in Matthew 18:1, it says, "And at that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, 'Who is the greatest of the kingdom?' And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, 'Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of God.'" And so in these first 3 verses, Jesus is using a child as an example. Okay, he was not using as a saying, you have to be a small child before you can enter the kingdom of heaven. He's not implying that at all. And so from here forward, as he talks about a child, he's talking about them and being like a child. And so everything that he talks about later about being a child is talking the same vein here. It's like a child. So he's not talking about children per se as we get into this. Okay?
He's talking about conversion.
Yeah, but in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you've got to be like this child. And the only way you can enter into the kingdom of heaven is the attributes of a child, right? Humility, being humble, acknowledging that, that there is nothing you can do on yourself. You are bankrupt of any ability to enter the kingdom of God by yourself. There's nothing you can do. With a child is completely dependent on the adults around, and completely trusting of the adults. So you've got to trust God completely and wholly. That's the kind of attributes that it's been talking about here, right?
And it's also the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?
Right.
So the answer to that question, you can't even get in.
Yeah.
So don't talk about rank.
Yeah.
About where you rank. You can't even get in unless you become basically the lowest of the low.
Right.
Someone who is completely devoid of any authority or anything.
Which is completely opposite of what mankind thinks is. When we ask, well, what's the greatest? We talk about the abilities and self-sufficiency and to be your own man and all this other stuff. That's how the world says who's the greatest, right? And we talk about that. I think of like Tiger Woods, about how great and wonderful of a skilled player he is when we think greatest.
Right.
So we get into this scripture here. So then starting in verse, we'll start at 5. Okay. Whoever receives one child, Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptations come. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search for the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Okay, stop there. And again, the reason why I wanted to emphasize about the phrases little ones and children throughout is because there are practices in some denominations that misread or misapply these phrases about children and salvation and infant baptism and other things, and they'll misapply using these as proof texts. But if you take it completely out of context, if you skip 1 through 4, out of that. So I just wanted to make sure we understood that. Okay, well, I read it. Go ahead and talk. Go ahead, discuss.
So your point is that when he says, and whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, he's not particularly talking about a child.
No, he's not
He's talking about the
Right.
person who would enter the kingdom of heaven
That is
as
correct.
a child.
Right, right. And it's interesting, I guess the way to encapsulate or an introduction to this is he's talking to unbelievers about his believers. I mean, this seems kind of strange, but it's kind of like the parent talking about his children. You know, when we start talking about our kids, we start to say it I'm proud that my kids are doing this. I'm happy, and I talk up my children. You know, I kind of like, you know, you live a little vicariously. Is it
Yeah,
like
sure.
Vicariously
Vicariously.
through your children. Vicariously through your children. You know, my youngest daughter is working in, you know, as a law professor, right? So therefore, obviously, I know everything about the law now,
Right,
because you know, Janet knows all the legal stuff, right? You know, that kind of thing. So we kind of just live through that, and that's kind of the sense that we're getting here. Is as you read it in the full context, is this is Jesus, you know, bragging on his children, and at the same time also defending his children. You know, putting out warnings because of that. So.
Well, you know, they're asking who's going to be the greatest, and it's sort of like a fleshly ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jesus turns around and starts talking about, first, like he was saying, you have to get there, you know, enter into eternity.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
And when he called the child, like they're coming to him, there's like no hesitation. The child's right in the midst of him.
In the latter part of verse, I guess, the middle of 6, I was looking for where the number was. It's got this phrase that says, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck. What do you think he means by that?
So evidently that's talking about somebody that's tried to thwart somebody's belief or sabotage their walk with the Lord.
Right,
Cause that child to stumble.
right, right. It's not causing them to lose salvation.
Mhm.
That's not proof text here about it. And the consequences of you causing someone to stumble is worse than what he described here.
Yeah.
Throwing a neck and drowning, you know. It's even worse than that. You know, I get this picture of, sometimes we think that that we have to pay back vengeance or
Right.
get back at people.
Right.
But the scriptures make it pretty clear that he will take vengeance for us. We don't need to do that. That phrase always pops in my mind, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Wish I knew where that was, because it's been ingrained in my head, and I'm sure I could probably do a word search on it, but and read what in context that all is. But that is kind of the idea, is that we don't have to take retribution back at individuals that attack us or hurt us or harm us or make us to stumble, because really that's God's work to do that. It's not something that we're not commissioned to do that. I mean, if you look at like the Great Commissioning, there is nothing that says, you know, now pay back evil for evil. Of all the choices of commissioning that he could have picked, why didn't he pick pay back evil for evil? Let's triumph over our enemies. Let's stomp them to the ground. But that's not what he says, right? Our commissioning is to tell others about him. That's the commission or the work to be done here.
Yeah, that was Romans 12:19.
12:19.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, read it.
Okay, it says, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine; I will repay,' saith the Lord. quote, vengeance is mine, I will repay. So it's a quote from,
Robert, from a previous, probably Old Testament or so.
yeah.
All right. So even Paul is, assume Paul was saying that.
Let's see where the quote from, vengeance is mine, quote. I'm not sure, oh yeah, here it is, right here. Looks like, maybe, no, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Oh, cited from Deuteronomy.
okay. Good old dude, the dudes. So then he talks about woe to the world. Who's this world?
Woe to the world for temptations to sin. I guess it'd just be the world. Huh?
Yeah, I was thinking of the word, and it's very dangerous for me to rewrite the Bible here, so I'm not rewriting words. I'm thinking more like the culture, our society, that which is acceptable in society, that leads people to temptation, or not to people to temptation, but to believers, the children, because remember in the context of where we're at here, to sin, and this is not a sin to lose salvation, but a sin of stumbling.
Yeah.
Here, it is nor is it I don't think it's a roadblock to salvation either. I think this is specifically about his children who are already in the kingdom, and he's talking about causing us to further stumble, to basically lose our witness, to put us down, if you will.
Lose your witness and lose your joy.
Your joy, your effectiveness, all that.
Walk with the Lord.
The walk with the Lord.
Daily walk.
Right.
Because if you think about Romans, in the beginning, chapter 1 of Romans, Paul talks about that. And when he talks about sinners and he talks about the world, he said, not only are sinners anti-God in the way that they act, but they also encourage others
Right.
to get into that same action so that their actions are legitimized, right?
Yeah.
They can feel good about their actions because, hey, I've just got a bunch of other people to come along with me to do this, so
Right.
it must be okay.
Yeah.
The whole time knowing that it's not.
Yeah.
So not only do they sin, but they encourage others to sin, which is exactly what he's talking about right here.
Extremely timely information, because it's as if they wrote this week, the scripture here, because we have it today, where culture will not be satisfied with the way we live our lives.
Right.
It just they're on full press, to fight against us. I mean, we feel it every day when Sundays, for example, was supposed to be the day that we keep as holy, so that we would be reminded of God's great work, right? To take that day of rest. That's not what society says today.
Right.
We look all over the place. I mean, there are a lot of pressures on IBM to work more days, right? Or to work on Sunday. For travel, they expect business travelers to travel on Sunday, right? To show up at 8 a.m. Monday morning kind of thing. And for me, I feel like I have to be a prima donna about it. Look, Sunday's is my sacred day. I will not travel on Sunday to be there on Monday. I will be there Monday late, but I can't. But I'm put into the position of being the prima donna about it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Not to say, the society didn't say, that's right, Howard, great reminder, let us all remember that.
Right.
It doesn't happen in our society. And that's just one example of that.
Right.
Well, okay. It is an interesting phrase that I've had a real trouble with, is that, for it is necessary that temptation come.
Yeah, mine says it is inevitable.
Inevitable, right.
Yes.
It is inevitable that temptations come. Is that the way it's?
It is inevitable that stumbling blocks come.
Right.
Right. And once again, that goes back to the nature of man, right?
Yep.
The world, anti-God, sinners, their nature is not only are they going to sin, but they're going to encourage others to sin. That's the nature of man. So inevitably, because they're sinners, we can only they can only act the way that they can act. They can
Right.
only act
Exactly.
like sinners, right? And part of that, they will try to encourage others to sin right along with them,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
You see it, you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Garner all the crowd that you can to come along with you
Right.
to sin.
I think, might be also saying that these little ones, these saved ones, are going to sin upon themselves also. In other words, my stumbling blocks are also my stumbling blocks, not someone else causing a stumbling block for me. I think it's just kind of an inevitable statement. Look, they're already going to be stumbling. Woe to you that are causing even more stumbling or adding to it. I'm not saying that's the definitive understanding here, but I think
Right.
that it kind of connects that we are still without excuse. The Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it.
Right.
Okay, we are still without excuse. We do sin, and we don't need others to help us sin.
Right.
Our very nature will kick our sin system in full gear. Is the way to look at that too. So I think there's kind of a tie there. But then he's persistent here. Jesus is, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. That's an odd wording, phrasing here. I had to read several commentaries to try to kind of balance out the words. Does anybody else have any idea what he's meaning by that? Woe to the one by whom the temptation comes.
Yeah, I mean, what is the enemy's weapon against us, right? The enemy's weapon against us is temptation. It's suggestion. That's all the enemy can do. He can suggest to us,
Yep.
that there is sin. There is something out there that's better than what God is allowing us to do or what's in God's plan, right? If you do this, hey, God's just like He did with Eve, right? God's trying to keep this away from you. It's really good stuff. Why don't you try it? And that's all Satan does. And I think exactly what's saying here is that sinners will do the same thing. Hey, hey, I just found out about this. Why don't you try this?
Right.
Right? Try it, and try it. You might like it, kind of thing. And I think that's what he's talking about here is that woe to that man through whom that suggestion to a believer, to one of the children of God, causes them, or even the suggestion, to them that might cause them to stumble. Right.
Absolutely. I think there is what's the word I'm looking for? A singularity. There's in the first part he talks about woe to the world,
Mm-hmm.
and in this he talks about woe to the one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of a big, not only woe to your nation or your society, your culture, going to be taking, that's bad for you, but so are the individuals that are within that. Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it's the individuals within that culture that actually
That's right.
individually
That does it.
make the suggestions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Once again, the individual is not innocent because they said, "Oh, well, the society is doing it, so therefore I should encourage." No, you're also without excuse.
Right.
As an individual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time people don't sin because they read it in the newspaper.
Right.
Most of the time people sin because their next door neighbor starts talking about it,
Yeah.
or the guy that they're working with starts talking about it, or whatever, right?
Right.
It's a personal one-on-one relationship that will most of the time cause people to sin.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's addressing.
Yeah.
Part of the whole sin nature and the way that society looks at it, but
Right.
it has to come down to that
Yeah.
individual
You take
level.
as a modern example. I think we have a gambling initiative that
Yeah.
has or hasn't passed. I don't know.
It hadn't, but it's in Slidell, and it's like step one. They're in the process of just voting to allow it to be on the
Mhm.
ballot.
Oh, is that what it is?
To be
Okay.
a-
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're having hearings and
Yeah.
public.
But even at that stage, like I've written the Slidell council, and I wrote, our state legislators, and I was trying to, this Louisiana Family Forum is trying to help you identify who to send emails to.
Right, that helps, yeah.
To oppose it.
Right. And so, just because the government sanctions it
Right.
and says that it is allowable, doesn't not make it sin-free.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But society says that once the government gets involved and says, okay, you can gamble, it must be
Must
okay.
be okay.
Our message is still the same. Greed is not okay.
Right.
Okay? The tenth commandment saying thou shalt not covet. There's a reason why, to gain something without work.
Right.
That's basically what that is. And that's what gambling is that. And that's just an example of sin. We could take legalization of drug consumption, whether it be
Right.
marijuana or other
Exactly.
things. Just because the government says it's okay to do, doesn't mean that it is okay to do.
Right.
Okay? But I think we kind of lose that in our society. It's, well, government says it's okay, we must be able to do it.
Right.
Yeah, and then at the same time, it's interesting, with the exception of one person, all the state level and local level senators, representatives, councilmen, and all have taken this approach. Well, let's allow it to go to a vote to the people. So I'm not saying it's that I'm
Right.
promoting it or not promoting it. I'm just saying
Right.
only one, Beth Mizell, the state senator, was the only one to say no. I'm going to consistently say no, and she was the only one.
Wow, that's good for that. That's good for that. It is, I wish they would do that with all the laws. If they're gonna do that, everything they say, well, we're gonna let the people decide.
Right.
I'd be happy with, instead of them deciding all the decisions. Here's this one time. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm getting onto my different soapbox here. I'm gonna get back onto the other soapbox. All right.
Of course, I was kind of thinking Austin,
Oh, yeah?
as a representative Republican, we need some people to make a decision,
Yeah.
a proper decision,
Yeah.
instead of just kick it down the road
Yeah.
and say, look,
Yeah, exactly. I've always looked at it as there still needs to be the role of this representative, but it's a representative between the people and the government to prevent the government from doing things against the people,
Yes. Sure.
as opposed to this representative being the face and voice of government to make decisions on the people.
Right.
It was supposed to be this
Right.
not blockade, a gate, a hedge
Mm-hmm.
of overreaching government, whether it be through bureaucrats or agencies and that kind of stuff. The laws were to restrict the government back and a protection between people and the government.
Right.
Is what it was, not to come up with leadership ideas and become, great leaders. But again, I was on the wrong soapbox again.
But using government as prime example of what we're talking about here is this whole idea of how many people do you know that get into politics or get into government with the right motives, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when they get in there?
Oh, yeah.
They get sucked into the stumbling blocks of what happens when you get in those positions of power. You get those influencers within government that cause people to turn,
Yeah.
to stumble,
Yep.
and what they get there
Oh,
to
yeah.
do,
Yep.
and they get sucked into this and
Into the system.
right, and allow themselves to get sucked in rather than take that stance against
Right.
what it is. I mean, it's a prime example of exactly
It
what's
really is.
talked about here.
It really is.
yeah.
And I continue, I gotta stay off that soapbox, get back over on this box, because I want to go over that box. Okay, verse 8, we're out of time here. I had a feeling we'd be out of time. We'll take the cutting your hands and face and eyeballs out later. We'll stop here. What are you guys praying for?